Silent Watcher. Chapter 1. The Sculptor. Elion lived in a small house near the edge of the town. His home was old but strong, with thick walls and a red roof. It stood close to the sea, where the wind was always moving and the air smelled of salt. The garden around his house was wild. Grass grew tall, and vines climbed the fence. But in the middle of this quiet place stood many statues. They were not like the ones in museums. These statues were strange, full of emotion and movement. Some looked like they were crying. Others looked like they were shouting or hiding. Their faces were full of feeling, and their bodies were frozen in action. Elion was a sculptor. He was a man in his 50s, with gray hair and tired eyes. His hands were strong and rough from years of work. He wore simple clothes, always covered in dust and clay. He did not speak much. He did not smile often. He lived alone. He had no family, no friends, and no visitors. He did not own a phone or a computer. He did not use the internet. He did not go to town. He ordered his tools and materials by mail. A delivery truck came once a week and left boxes at his gate. Elion took them inside and returned to his work. Inside his house, everything was quiet. The rooms were filled with stone blocks, clay bags, and wooden tools. There were sketches on the walls and half-finished sculptures on the tables. Elion worked from morning to night. He did not follow a plan. He did not copy pictures. He simply carved what came to his mind. He shaped faces, hands, and eyes with great care. He gave each statue a feeling, a moment, a story. He worked slowly, listening only to the sound of his tools and the wind outside. The people in town knew about Elion, but they did not know him well. They called him strange, but they did not bother him. They said he was quiet, but not dangerous. Some thought he was sad. Others thought he was just different. Children sometimes walked past his house and looked through the fence. They saw the statues and felt curious. Adults told them not to stare. He likes his privacy, they said. And so, Elion was left alone. He liked it that way. He did not want noise or questions. He did not want to explain his art. He believed that silence helped him think. He believed that the wind carried stories and the sea held secrets. He listened to the world in his own way. He watched people from a distance. He saw how they moved, how they looked when they thought no one was watching. He remembered their faces, their gestures, their emotions. And then he carved them. Elion's garden became a place of frozen truth. Each statue told a silent story. Each figure held a moment that felt real. But no one knew how Elion chose what to sculpt. No one knew how he captured such deep emotion. His art was quiet, but powerful. It made people stop and think. It made them feel something they could not explain. And so, Elion continued his work. Day after day, he shaped stone and clay. He did not ask for attention. He did not seek praise. He simply watched, listened, and carved. His house remained quiet. His garden grew full. And the town, though silent, began to feel the presence of something more. Something they could not see, but could not ignore. The silent watcher was always there. And his art was beginning to speak. Chapter 2. The First Discovery. Saskia was a woman in her early 40s. She lived in the same town as Elion, just a few streets away from his quiet house. She worked part-time at the local library and spent her mornings walking through the neighborhood before her shift. She liked the fresh air and the sound of the sea in the distance. Her walks were peaceful, and she often passed Elion's garden without stopping. She had seen his sculptures before, but she never paid much attention. They were strange, yes, but she thought they were just art, nothing more. One morning, Saskia walked past Elion's house like usual. The sky was cloudy, and the wind was soft. She glanced at the garden and stopped. There was a new sculpture near the gate. It was different from the others. It showed a man sitting on a bench, holding a letter in his hands. His head was slightly down, and his shoulders were tense. His face looked worried, almost afraid. The detail was so real that Saskia felt a chill in her chest. She stepped closer and looked again. The man in the sculpture looked exactly like her neighbor, Bram. Bram was a quiet man in his 50s who worked for a local company. He lived alone and didn't talk much. A few weeks earlier, there had been rumors about him. People said he had taken money from the company and tried to hide it. Nothing was proven, but the story had spread. Saskia remembered seeing Bram sitting on a bench near the park, holding a letter, looking just like the sculpture. The pose, the expression, even the clothes, it was all too real. Saskia felt confused. How could Elion know about that moment? He never left his house. He didn't speak to anyone. He didn't use a phone or computer. Yet, the sculpture showed something private, something that had happened quietly, away from others. It was not just a piece of stone. It was a mirror of a secret. She told a few people in town. They came to see the sculpture. They stood near the gate and whispered. Some pointed. Others stayed silent. Everyone saw the truth in the statue. It was Bram. There was no doubt. People began to ask questions. How did Elion know? Why did he choose that moment? Was it just a guess, or something more? More people came each day. They walked slowly past the garden, looking at the other sculptures. They wondered if any of them showed someone they knew. They looked for faces, for clues, for signs. The garden became a quiet place of mystery. Elion did not come outside. He stayed in his house, working as always. He did not speak to the visitors. He did not explain the sculpture. But the message was clear. His art was not random. It was personal. Saskia felt uneasy. She had always believed that secrets were safe in Belford. People didn't talk about personal things. They kept their problems inside. But now, it seemed that someone was watching. Someone was showing the truth through stone and clay. Saskia began to think about her own life. She wondered if Elion had seen something in her. She wondered if her own secrets were safe. The sculpture of Bram stayed near the gate. It did not move. It did not change. But it changed the town. People began to look at each other differently. They began to wonder what Elion would sculpt next. They began to feel that their private lives were not so private anymore. The garden was no longer just a place for art. It was a place for truth. And the truth was not easy to ignore. Chapter 3. The Pattern. After the sculpture of Bram appeared near Elion's gate, people in town became more curious. They started walking past Elion's garden more often. Some came early in the morning. Others came in the evening. They looked through the fence and tried to understand what they were seeing. At first, they thought it was just one strange statue. But soon, more sculptures appeared. Each one showed a different person from town. Each one showed a moment that felt private, secret, and real. One sculpture showed a woman sitting in a car. Her hands were on the steering wheel, and her head was down. Her shoulders were shaking. Her face was full of sadness. People recognized her. She was a teacher at the local school. She was known for being strong and calm. But the sculpture showed something else. It showed her crying alone. No one had ever seen her like that. No one knew she was struggling. Another sculpture showed a teenage boy climbing out of a window at night. His face looked nervous. His body was halfway through the window. People knew who he was. He lived near the bakery. His parents were strict, and he was quiet at school. The sculpture showed him sneaking out. It showed a moment that was never meant to be seen. It showed a secret. Then came the sculpture of a man standing alone in the woods. He held a shovel. His clothes were dirty. His face looked tired and scared. People whispered his name. He worked at the hardware store. He had lost his wife 2 years ago. No one knew why he went to the woods. No one knew what he was doing there. But the sculpture made people wonder. It made them ask questions they had never asked before. The details in each sculpture were exact. The faces looked real. The emotions were clear. The poses were natural. It was as if Elion had seen these moments with his own eyes. But how could that be? He never left his house. He didn't speak to anyone. He didn't have a phone or a computer. He didn't go to the park or the school or the store. Yet, his art revealed private moments, moments no one else should have seen. People began to panic. They felt watched. They felt exposed. They started talking in hushed voices. They looked over their shoulders. They wondered if Elion had cameras hidden around town. They checked trees and streetlights. They looked at his windows. But they found nothing. Others believed he had a gift. They said he could feel emotions from far away. They said he could see into people's hearts. A few thought he was dangerous. They said his art was not just strange, it was a threat. Some people stopped walking past his house. They didn't want to see themselves in stone. They didn't want their secrets revealed. Others kept coming. They wanted to know more. They wanted to understand how Elion worked. They wanted to see who would appear next. The garden became a place of fear and fascination. It was quiet, but full of tension. Elion did not change. He stayed inside his house. He continued to sculpt. He did not speak to the visitors. He did not explain his work. He did not answer questions. He simply carved. His hands moved with care. His eyes stayed focused. His garden grew full of frozen moments. And the town grew full of quiet worry. People began to look at each other differently. They wondered what secrets their neighbors were hiding. They wondered what Elion might show next. They wondered if their own private moments would appear in stone. The sculptures were not just art. They were mirrors. They showed the truth. And the truth was not easy to face. Chapter 4. The Confrontation. The town of Zandmeer had always been quiet. People respected each other's privacy. They didn't ask too many questions. They didn't talk about personal problems. But after Elion's sculptures began to show private moments, everything changed. People no longer felt safe. They felt watched. They felt exposed. Whispers filled the streets. Neighbors looked at each other with doubt. Some avoided Elion's house. Others visited the garden every day, searching for new statues. The tension grew stronger with each sculpture. The mayor of Zandmeer was a man named Willem. He was in his 60s, with gray hair and a serious face. He had lived in the town his whole life. He believed in order and calm. He didn't like trouble. He didn't like mystery. When people started complaining about Elion, Willem decided to act. He didn't want fear to spread. He didn't want the town to fall apart. So one morning, he walked to Elion's house. Willem stood at the gate and looked into the garden. The statues were everywhere. Some were standing. Some were sitting. All of them looked real. Their faces showed pain, sadness, fear, and guilt. Willem felt uneasy. He opened the gate and walked slowly toward the house. Elion was outside, working on a new sculpture. He didn't look up. He didn't speak. Willem asked questions. He wanted to know how Elion chose the people. He wanted to know how Elion knew their secrets. He wanted to know if Elion was spying on the town. Elion didn't answer. He didn't say a word. He simply pointed to the sculptures around him. Willem turned and looked. His eyes stopped on one statue near the wall. It showed a man standing in a dark room, holding a broken phone. The man's face looked tired and worried. His shoulders were heavy. Willem felt his heart beat faster. The statue looked exactly like him. The pose, the clothes, the expression, it was all too familiar. Willem remembered that moment. It had happened months ago. He had been in his office, trying to call someone. The phone had broken, and he had stood there, feeling helpless. No one had seen him. No one had known. But now, the moment was carved in stone. He turned pale. He didn't speak. He left quickly, walking back to town without looking back. After that day, the town changed even more. People demanded action. They wanted Elion to stop. They said his art was dangerous. They said he was hurting people. They said he was breaking the peace. Some wanted to remove the sculptures. Others wanted to send Elion away. But no one knew how to stop him. He didn't break any laws. He didn't speak. He didn't defend himself. He just carved. Elion continued his work. He didn't react to the anger. He didn't answer the questions. He didn't explain his art. He stayed in his garden, shaping stone and clay. His hands moved slowly, carefully. His eyes stayed focused. Each sculpture was made with care. Each one showed a moment that felt real. His garden grew full of truth. And the town grew full of fear. People began to look at themselves. They wondered what Elion might show next. They wondered if their own secrets would appear in stone. They tried to hide their feelings. They tried to stay quiet. But the sculptures kept coming. And each one spoke louder than words. Elion did not need to speak. His art spoke for him. It showed what people tried to hide. It showed what they didn't want to face. And even though the town wanted him to stop, he didn't. He kept carving. He kept watching. He kept revealing the truth. Chapter 5. The Reflection. Saskia walked slowly through the quiet street. The sun was low, and the sky was turning orange. The wind was soft, and the town felt calm. But inside her heart, there was no peace. She had been thinking about Elion's sculptures for days. Each one showed something private, something hidden. People were afraid, but they were also curious. Saskia had seen many of the statues. She had recognized faces, emotions, and moments. She had felt the truth in the stone. And now, she felt something pulling her back to the garden. She reached Elion's house just before sunset. The gate was open, and the garden was quiet. No one else was there. She walked slowly between the statues. Each one seemed to watch her. Each one seemed to speak without words. Then she saw a new sculpture. It stood near the center of the garden, where the light touched the stone gently. Saskia stopped. Her breath became slow. Her hands began to shake. The sculpture was her. She was standing in front of a mirror, looking away. Her body was tense. Her face was full of shame. The detail was perfect. The shape of her hair, the curve of her shoulders, the way her hands were held close to her chest, it was all real. Saskia felt cold. She remembered that moment. It had happened many years ago. She had been in her bedroom, standing in front of the mirror. She had made a choice that day, a choice she never told anyone. It was something she had hidden deep inside. She had tried to forget it. But now, it was here, carved in stone. She didn't know how Elion had seen it. He had never been in her house. He had never spoken to her. But the sculpture showed the truth. It showed the feeling she had tried to bury. Saskia felt tears in her eyes. She didn't cry, but she felt the weight of the memory. She stood in front of the statue for a long time. She didn't move. She didn't speak. She just looked. In that moment, she understood something important. Elion was not trying to hurt people. He was not trying to shame them. He was showing them what they refused to see. His art was not cruel. It was honest. It was a mirror. It reflected the parts of life that people tried to hide. It showed the pain, the fear, the guilt, and the silence. It asked people to look, not to run. Saskia thought about the town. She thought about the people who had seen their secrets in stone. She thought about the fear, the anger, and the confusion. But now, she saw something else. She saw the chance to face the truth. She saw the chance to heal. The town had lived in silence for too long. People had kept their feelings inside. They had avoided hard questions. They had chosen comfort over honesty. Elion's work was changing that. His sculptures were not just art. They were invitations. They were quiet voices saying, "Look closer." Saskia felt a strange peace. She didn't feel angry anymore. She felt grateful. She had been hiding for years. Now, she could begin to let go. She could begin to speak. She left the garden slowly. The wind touched her face. The sky was darker now, but she felt lighter. She didn't know what others would say. She didn't know if they would understand. But she knew one thing. Elion's art had shown her the truth. And the truth was the first step toward change. Chapter 6. The Change. The town of Zandmeer began to change slowly, like the tide pulling back from the shore. It did not happen in one day or one week. It happened in small moments. People started talking more. They met in cafes, in parks, and on quiet streets. They spoke about things they had never shared before. They told stories from their past. They admitted mistakes. They apologized to each other. The silence that had lived in the town for so long began to break. Neighbors who had not spoken in years started greeting each other again. Families who had kept secrets began to open up. Teachers spoke honestly with students. Friends listened more carefully. The fear that had filled the town after Elion's sculptures began to fade. People were no longer afraid of being seen. They were ready to be understood. Saskia became one of the voices in this change. After seeing her own sculpture, she felt something shift inside her. She began to speak more openly. She shared her story with others. She told them about the moment in front of the mirror, the shame she had carried, and the peace she had found. Her honesty helped others feel brave. They saw that truth did not have to hurt. It could heal. Elion stopped sculpting. One morning, people noticed that no new statues had appeared. His tools were quiet. His hands were still. He stayed inside his house, just like before. But his garden remained. It was full of frozen truths. Each sculpture stood in silence, holding a moment that had once been hidden. People still came to look. They walked slowly between the statues. They remembered the stories. They felt the emotions. But now, they were not afraid. They were grateful. No one ever learned how Elion knew those private moments. He never explained. He never wrote a book or gave an interview. He didn't need to. His work had done its job. The sculptures had spoken. The town had listened. And now, the people were awake. They saw each other more clearly. They understood that silence could be dangerous. That hiding pain only made it grow stronger. That truth, even when difficult, could bring light. Elion returned to his quiet life. He still lived alone. He still walked through his garden. But he no longer needed to carve. He had helped in his own way. He had used his art to open hearts. He had shown people what they were afraid to see. And now, they were ready to face it. Zandmeer became a different town. It was still small. The streets were still narrow. The sea still whispered nearby. But the people had changed. They were softer, stronger, and more honest. They carried their stories with pride. They helped each other carry the heavy ones. And in the center of it all stood Elion's garden, a quiet place full of stone and truth. Moral: truth cannot stay hidden forever. When we face what we fear, we begin to heal. Silence protects secrets, but art can reveal them. Sometimes, the quietest voice speaks the loudest. Thank you for your attention. If you like the story, please like and subscribe. It motivates us to make new videos and helps us promote the channel. Thank you.